Hi, I'm Leshok, and this is my presentation regarding the future of space exploration. Speaking before a joint session of Congress on May 25, 1961, then President John F. Kennedy boldly stated that, quote, "I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth." Then, on July 16, 1969, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's Apollo 11 mission took off, sending man to the moon and winning the space race for America. 33 years later, Elon Musk, a futurist and CEO of Tesla, founded SpaceX in hopes of advancing private sector space exploration. Just 16 years after its launch, SpaceX launched their Falcon Heavy rocket, revolutionizing the private space industry. At its launch, the Falcon Heavy rocket became the most powerful operational rocket by a factor of 2, whilst maintaining partial reusability, a trait not common in such high-thrust rockets. Now, to understand the future of space exploration, one must first understand the past, which began with Russia's launch of Sputnik 1 and 2 in October and November 1957, respectively. To retaliate, the United States launched the Explorer 1 probe, and shortly after, NASA was formed as a fully funded organization to carry the United States through the space race to their victory with the Apollo 11 mission. Now, this carries on into what I deem the SpaceX era, which began in 2002 at SpaceX's founding. Now, this started in 2002 and carried on until NASA's first successful launch of the Falcon 1 rocket. Now, I chose SpaceX to represent my private sector organization, as it has been the most influential of the private sector industry, as it just launched its Falcon Heavy rocket on February 6, 2018. Now, this begs the question, how has the rise of privatized space administrations assisted with issues incorporated in governmental space agencies? Through my research, I was able to produce the thesis that the rise of privatized space, the perception of private space organizations has greatly increased due to the failures of government space agencies. Now, my first claim is that consistent setbacks that have plagued NASA have proven to be inexistent in private space organizations. A great example of this is the Constellation program. The Constellation program began in 2005 under President Bush's administration. Now, the Constellation program planned to take man to the moon, and from the knowledge gained getting to the moon, then take man to Mars. However, in 2009, the Obama administration canceled the Constellation program. Now, despite this cancellation, NASA was forced to finish the construction of any facilities planned to be used for the Constellation program. Now, among those is Test Stand A3, a facility that goes unused yet costs NASA $900,000 a year to maintain. Collectively, these unused facilities cost NASA $24 million a year to maintain. Now, Douglas Cobb, a writer for Government Liberty Voice, states that these problems are, generally speaking, less the fault of poor planning by NASA, as more so the fault of ever-changing presidential administrations. If the public sector were able to focus on one goal until completion, like that of its private sector counterpart, SpaceX, it would be able to advance at a much more rapid pace. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., an American historian and author of The History as a Participant, provides some insight as to why the public sector has lagged behind the private sector. In his article, he states that the present becomes the past more swiftly than ever before. This means what is breakthrough technology one day has the potential to be outdated only months later. Additionally, Cobb corroborates this idea when he states that over 80% of NASA's facilities are more than 40 years old. Together, these sources assist into the understanding as to why NASA has fallen behind the public sector. Now, in addition to these setbacks, NASA's budget has been too inadequate to maintain space exploration. As pictured here is NASA's budget as a percent of the federal budget. As you can see, NASA had a peak budget of 4.4% in 1966, and since then, a steady decline in various amounts every year have proven to be inconsistent for space exploration. Now, additionally, Attorney Jeff Zinsmeister writes in his article, Private Space, a Free Market Approach to Space Exploration, that the easy money from the government is drying up. Harsh budget cuts have caused the reallocation of assets, and that has taken money away from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Now, additionally, at South by Southwest, an American film festival, Elon Musk stated that many of the origins of SpaceX were to assist a failing governmental space program. Now, together, these sources are able to show that NASA's budget is currently inadequate. Finally, clashing political opinions that have proven to be inexistent in private space organizations have plagued NASA for far too long. For example, in Defying Politics, the Laws of Physics are the least of NASA's challenges, Scientific American, a journal that has been publishing articles for over 170 years, writes that Obama proposed jettisoning much of the Constellation program which Bush had set up. Additionally, Joel Achenbach, scientific and political writer for the Washington Post, wrote in his article, Which Way to Space, that the administration decided to extend the life of the space station whilst counting on private companies to get man into orbit. Scientific American's article specifically states that Obama had proposed allowing private sector organizations to put man back into space. Specifically, what tilts the balance in favor of Obama's plan is that you can't really leave aside the politics. Simply being a governmental asset has surrounded NASA in a clashing political climate that has caused far too many changes to the administration. To conclude, I propose that the dissolution of NASA and subsequent dissemination of resources into the private sector would put a final end to NASA's downfall. Through uncompleted missions, inconsistent ideals, and far too little funding, NASA's glory has finally come to an end. The private sector shows a promising future that is not seen in the public sector. Now, with this solution, practicality and limitations must be discussed. NASA has already begun leasing facilities to the private sector, which has helped with the high maintenance cost of these otherwise unused facilities. Additionally, SpaceX and NASA have worked together on missions to the International Space Station, in which SpaceX has shown extreme competence working with such a large organization. Finally, despite an almost $19 billion difference in their budgets, SpaceX has been able to work on a far smaller budget whilst maintaining advancements not seen since the space race. Now with this, limitations include the fact that NASA is the base of space exploration, and then the termination of such a large organization could not be absorbed by all of the private sector. This could lead to a separation of assets into the private sector. Finally, many Americans have grown up with NASA being their sole space exploration company. The announcement of the termination of such a large organization would almost certainly cause turmoil throughout the country. However, despite these limitations, SpaceX shows a promising future in the space exploration field that should not go unnoticed to the public.
Isaac, 2 questions for you. First one, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, whether in your paper or in this presentation, and can you tell me why you chose not to use it?
Sure. So I gathered information from a 4-part series by Joel Achenbach, the writer for the Washington Post. Within his article, he had many significant points as to why the private sector has advantages over the public sector. However, due to time constraints on this project, I was unable to include that into my final project.
Thank you. And second, explain the level of certainty you have about your conclusion, solutions, recommendations.
Sure. So as previously stated, Joel Achenbach had a very similar solution to that of mine. And having a scholar feel the same way about this issue as I have been able to research and from the knowledge that I've gathered, I feel fairly certain about my solution.
Okay. All right. Thank you.